Through the concrete cracks worn weary by work boots and high heels. Through the concrete cracks showered in tears of sorrow, tears of joy. Through the concrete cracks rumbled by reverberations of 100 years, a flower on the hill takes its first breath, and a grand hope springs. Welcome to the Spring Street podcast at the intersection of creation and destruction in the heart of downtown Los Angeles. And now, a word from the sponsors. This podcast is sponsored by Starship Kairos, a podcast studio available for bookings in downtown Los Angeles. Starship Kairos is where my guests and I make this show happen. Soundproofed, cozy, and equipped with professional audio gear, Starship Kairos is an ideal location for any type of podcast. Starship Kairos offers a full suite of services including content consultation, mixing and mastering, and custom jingle writing. For rates and booking, check them out on Instagram at Starship Kairos or click on the link in the description. And now, let's dive in. All right, Dakota.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Spring Street podcast.
Thanks for having me.
How you doing today?
I'm doing really well.
Thanksgiving.
Today.
Happy Thanksgiving.
It's Happy Thanksgiving.
You know, when I think about Thanksgiving, it makes me think about turkeys.
Yeah.
When I'm thinking about turkeys, I'm thinking about being in the woods.
Yeah.
And a big question that I have is, if I was in the woods, how would I survive?
Yeah.
If only we had a book that could tell us.
I think I've heard of a book.
How to survive in the woods.
It's yeah. No. I've read some excerpts of a book.
I've read experts
on surviving the woods. And do you think you could survive in the woods?
I think that I could survive well, it depends.
Okay.
What do I have anything with me? It's like Naked and Afraid.
Yeah.
You get to choose one thing.
You have whatever's currently on your person.
Dang. I guess I'm not prepared. You sound like a survivalist. Like, this is the test. What do you have on you right now? Because if you
What,
don't...
am I going to go dump you in the woods?
Maybe. I don't know.
When I was younger, this is a true story. When I was younger, I used to carry around a survival kit just in case. It was during the era that the Hunger Games was really shaping my generation. So I always used to carry around this tiny, like, it started off as a full backpack, and then I kind of like whittled it down to this little pack that had matches, rope, a whistle, a compass. It had flint and steel.
Dang.
It had a pocket knife, a Leatherman. It was like, and it was like this. Oh, and like a mini, like I had some alcohol wipes and some like Band-Aids, you know.
Yeah, you're ready to go.
Yeah. And
you're ready for the end of the world.
So I came up with that because I'm a genius, right?
You put that together.
I was like,
kit.
let me think. Yeah. I was 11, 12. I was like, let me think of the things that I would need. And I always carried it around with me. I always carried a backpack, and I always had that in there. My brother was like, you're so stupid. And I was like, no. I swear this is one day going to save my life. 3 months later, my brother became known as the survival kit kid because he got this like, army style backpack and like built out the survival kit of things that like superfluous things where I was like, I have the bare minimum and everything I could possibly need. And you're building out this like it's clunky. There it's a whole backpack. Like, what if you need to put other things in your backpack? You got to take out your like necessary survival items. And then he was like, well, I came up with this. And I was like, don't lie. I came up with that 3 months ago. You've stolen it and now you've coined it. And that is the epitome of our relationship.
Wow.
It's really upsetting. Actually, I'm not past it.
Clearly. You said when you were 12?
Yeah, probably. Sometime around there. It'll stay with me forever.
Nonetheless, though, the question still stands. Would you be able to survive in the woods?
With what I have currently on my person? Probably not, no.
Probably not. 1 day?
Yeah.
2 days?
2 days.
A week?
Absolutely.
Could you do a week?
I feel like I do know a bit about trapping and a bit about starting a fire.
Okay.
And a little bit about maps.
What do you know about trapping?
Mostly about trapping birds.
Really?
Yeah, because that's what I read in the book while you were in the bathroom. And it was actually really informative.
Okay, what did you learn about trapping birds?
A lot about how easy it is to like dig a hole and get a bird, like a goose, into a hole. And then when they try and fly away, they can't actually expand their wings.
Oh my goodness.
And I was like, oh, that's genius and so simple.
Dang,
and then a bit
that's
about
a big catch too. If you get a goose, you're going to be fed for the next few days.
But then think about it. How do I clean the goose? Don't have a knife. How do I cook the goose? I don't have flint and steel to make a fire. I got to make fire the old-fashioned way. I will not be eating a goose raw. I think that I could get up to the point of like skinning and cooking an animal.
Wow.
Like I could trap it.
Wow.
That's all.
That's impressive. You know what? Watch me end up lost in the woods one day. And I'll be thinking about, I need to dig a hole to catch some geese.
Also, if you can find roosting or nesting birds, easy. They're already on the ground. Also,
because they're babies or?
No, because they're like, there's some birds that like a roosting bird is like a bird that built its nest in the ground.
Got it.
Nobody fact checked me on that. I could be pulling that out of my ass, but I think that's true. And nesting birds, they're not moving. So boom, easy enough.
Or eggs.
Yeah,
some bird eggs.
Most bird eggs, actually. And if you find a nest, I learned this 45 seconds ago. If you find a nest, you want to get the freshest eggs because those are the ones that have like the least likelihood of like incubation. So if you find a nest and there's already eggs in them, mark the eggs that are already there and then come back the next day and see if there's new eggs and then take those because those will only be a day old. Whereas the other ones, you don't know how long they've been there.
Damn, this is some good knowledge.
This is what I learned from that book.
Who wrote this book?
Ago.
I feel like we got to give this person a shout out. Angler? What is their name?
Bradford Anger.
Bradford Anger. Texas Ranger.
Sounds like Ranger or Stranger Danger.
Shout out to that guy. I mean,
he wrote a pretty good book.
How many lives do you think he saved?
I don't know. Did you see me try
You were
to
doing the
math?
calculation. I saw the numbers.
Yeah.
I saw the geometry. And
it was a meme.
Exactly.
Oh, that was bad.
Okay, well, this is surprisingly big surprise. This podcast is actually not about survival tips.
Whoa.
Maybe it could be though. We'll just read books.
Right.
We'll just read the books. You checking out this waveform?
I am.
It's pretty sweet, right? Pretty nifty.
That's true.
How does it feel to be in this studio in a context where we're not pulling out of a bag topics and characters?
Excuse me. It feels good. I never knew what it would really be like. That was so fun, but so stressful. I don't know why I put so much pressure on myself to be funny.
But you killed it.
Thank you. I was gonna argue you on that, but I won't.
So earlier,
I have to cough.
talking
I'm
about
so sorry.
improv and theatrical things, we were talking about different methodologies of acting.
Yeah, we were.
You have some very strong opinions about the Meisner approach.
I do.
I kind of want to touch back on that, but I'm also curious about what your approach is to acting.
Okay. Pardon me for the sniffles.
It's okay.
It's bad.
'Tis the season.
It is indeed. My approach is never just one thing. It's always many, many things. I think to limit yourself is counterintuitive. So when people are like, I only use this technique, I'm like, then you're hurting yourself. Mm-hmm. I would say that my emphasis is on physicality and voice and speech, just because that's what I've studied the most, is a lot of voice and speech work and a lot of physical work. So something called the viewpoints and a couple of like Stanislavski was really good with this. There's just this planes of existence and understanding the spine of your character and how they move and like Laban's efforts, which is kind of wrapped up in viewpoints work as well. I think that I work depending on the character, I'll either work externally inward, find the way that they move, the way that they speak, and then make sure that that's rooted and justified in the text, or inward to like out, which would go for initially the like psychology of a character and then move outward. But it depends on the character, and it also depends on the work and where I'm at on the day, and if I need something more physical to kind of break into my own body, or if I'm really warm and I want to start with something intellectual. But I would say for a lot of the work that I do, I'll start with Michael Shurtleff's technique from his book Audition, which is a phenomenal book, because it goes through these guideposts. And the person that I studied with in New York, Tom Todoroff, he knew Michael Shurtleff, and so there's 12 guideposts in the book, and then they came up with a few more together because they were friends after the book was published. So I think there's 15 guideposts. But they're just really helpful to like immediately drop into the world and begin to build the piece that you're working on. So the guideposts are 1 is relationship, 2 is conflict, 3 is the moment before, 4 is humor, 5 is opposite, 6 is discovery, 7 is communication and competition, 8 is importance, 9 is find the events, 10 is place, 11 is communication and gameplay and role playing, 12 is mystery and secret, 13 is mischief, 14 is vulnerability, and 15 is architecture. And the point is, if I get sides for an audition, I'm going to go through it looking for each of these things in depth, which means that I've just gone through the text 15 times, focusing on different things. And that ultimately lends itself to the goal of, I hate the idea of memorization, because memorization is all in the side of your brain that does like rote, numbers and patterns and whatever. And then the second that you try to apply any emotion to it, you're moving into a different side of your brain. So then all of the memorization work that you've just done goes out the window because your body doesn't know, it's not reaching there, right? So that when you've gone through your like 4-page text 15 times, focusing on different things, connecting different dots, finding nuance, I typically, at the end of that process, I don't even have to work to memorize it. It's already in my brain. I've just done it 15 times, like layer after layer after layer. So everything that I do is going for those, like the layers of nuance that come with human beings. And then I think it is important to talk about how emotion physically manifests. And like each of these things, they're called, in the book, they're called guideposts. And I had another acting coach once call them goalposts, because she was like, all I see is actors like shooting for these things. And it made me think, oh yeah, they're not the end all be all. They're stepping stones on the journey. And the point is to take the journey of the text. And to do that, I want to comb through it and find everything, because there's the classic line, like, if it ain't on the page, it ain't on the stage. And that's true. So figure out what's on the page. But in that, there's so much history between characters. There's so much, there's so much like, relational information. There's like, going for the first guidepost, relationship. What is my relationship to everything? If I mention a person, if I talk about a thing, who am I talking to? Where am I? What am I doing? What's my job? Why do I care? If you just care about everything, you've already built nuance into your character's life. And then the second thing, conflict. What am I fighting for? How am I meddling? That is the journey of the piece. I have to sniffle again. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, it's okay.
Anyway, so I'll start off with those, and then I take it into the physical space, and I've done Alexander technique, and I have a dance background, so sometimes finding music that connects to my character, especially if it's a bigger project, making a playlist for the character that I'm playing.
Whoa, that's cool.
Finding, other pieces of media that I feel like they would relate to, and why. Because it just goes into that, like, justify everything, which is a mindset that I carry into all the work that I do. Justify everything, every word that I say, every move that I make, because I hate when actors do that, like, extraneous movement thing because they're uncomfortable being in their body, but it has no point. So it's just like, one of my acting coaches has this saying, tension draws attention to itself. And when people are tense, they try and get it out however they can. And that frantic energy goes nowhere, and it's distracting. So when you have a level of familiarity with the work, you have a ground that you can build off of. And then everything becomes incredibly justified. Every point, every turn, every bit of blocking. And I think that that's so fun. And thinking about it in the framework of choreography, I'm like, yeah, it is really intentional. It all tells a super specific story. So that's why I love things like Alexander, which is just figuring out. Alexander was, what's his full name? The guy that started Alexander Technique, his last name is Alexander, but I don't remember his first name. He was an opera singer, I want to say, and he found, or no, he was an actor, but he found that by the end of a show, his voice would be gone. He was like, why do I lose my voice every time I'm on stage? And so he started to just watch himself religiously. He would watch his rehearsals in the mirror and start noticing what was happening with his body. And he started doing all this research into like your physical body. And he found that when he started shouting, his neck would go forward, and that would almost put this break in his like windpipe, which made his vocal cords strain. Yeah. And so he started to find that like alignment of the body was so necessary to find like freedom in your instrument. So he studied like opera singers and how much space they need. And so he created this whole technique based on and around the state of your spine and how it affects everything. And so that study became a basis for me to like understand the way that my voice moves and understand how to find stillness and like a center, and then how to adjust for a character. Like if you're playing like what's that one musical? The Hunchback of Notre Dame, right? Or if you're playing like some Shakespearean character who has a physical, adjustment that they have to make, how do you make that adjustment without destroying your instrument? But it's such a useful skill. So this is what I'm talking about when you have skills. Your 15 guideposts are always applicable and always repeatable. Alexander Technique is continuously, consistently applicable to anything that you do and repeatable. It's just knowing yourself, right? And then you've got like voice and speech work, being really aware of your voice and of the dialect that you're trying to use, or the way that where your voice sits, and how to warm it up and cool it down and do everything so that it stays super healthy, because that's your instrument. And then like Laban's efforts, which are he came up with this like grid, I guess, for every effort having a different attribute, and then discussing the connection of those attributes to create different efforts, and how there's like push, press, float. It's either, light or heavy, it's direct or indirect, it is quick or it's fast or slow, sustained, or maybe it's quick or sustained or something like that. But it's all of these attributes, and then you put them together and you get a press, And what does it mean to physically press? But then what does it mean to press with your voice? And what does it mean to have a thought that's pressing? It's these physical attributes that relate to abstract concepts and ground everything. Mm-hmm. So instead of Meisner, where you're reaching for something emotional, never sure if you're going to get it, and there's no way to repeat it, you have some grounding in reality that is always true. And you can always find something in, even if it changes. Because I also agree that like it shouldn't always be the same. You should be finding something new. And there's days when, a performance will hit you one way, and days when a performance will hit you completely differently. And so you have to be free and open to letting it, lending yourself to the text and the moment and the emotion that's flowing through you. And to do that, you have to be free. You can't be tense. You have to know what you know. You can't, it can't be floating away from you. And so I just find that things that start off really concrete and are applicable to the abstract are my favorite ways, like my favorite techniques to be grounded in. And then, the world of imagination, absolutely. But the world of imagination is also concrete. It's finding something. It's chasing. It's going. It's not emotions, which especially in like there's Meisner and a couple others that are like, hey, use your emotions to like influence the moment. And I disagree, because when you blur the line between character and actor, it becomes really, really unhealthy and also not repeatable. If you've got an 8-week run and you imagine your dad dying every night as Hamlet, that's gonna the toll that takes on your psyche is not worth it. So instead, justify the text, make the text so real to you, and then when you walk away from Hamlet, you walk away from it. There's just no point in my opinion, in some of these techniques that the reason that they get so close to the heart is because there's no technique involved. You need to draw on something real because there's no structure. And so that's why that's why I disagree with it. And that's also my process is like, how can I make this as structured as possible so that I can always find the architecture of it, so that I can always just step in and take the journey, whatever the journey looks like. I know that there's a journey, you know?
Yeah, that's really interesting. Do you feel like there's characters that are easier for you to get into, and then other characters that you really struggle with?
Good question. Characters that are easier for me to get into. Characters that have a strong universal are always going to be easier to find.
What do you mean by that?
A strong universal is, you know, love, family, money.
Okay.
Any character has maybe on initial inspection has a more abstract need or want or universal. I think good writing always has a really strong universal. It has to, because that's what makes us resonate, and that's what makes people fight, is this like, oh, I get it, you know? But sometimes characters can look like they don't, you know, maybe have it as strong of a universal. Like, I'm thinking of Natalie Portman's character in the film that she has with Jude Law. Why can't I think of this?
Let me find it.
I want to say it's called. I actually have no idea what it's called, and I can't think of it right now.
Natalie Portman. Oh, what? That's Wikipedia. It'll go to her filmography. I love Natalie Portman.
Oh my gosh.
Leon the Professional.
Dude.
So incredible.
So good. And even that, like, there is a strong universal there. But like. Closer. I was right. It is called Closer. Okay.
Closer?
I should have just said it. Yeah.
2004. I don't know this movie. Oh, Julia Roberts. Crazy.
It's a great film. But even like, I think her character in that is a little bit more abstract, or like even like Sunshine in a Spotless Mind, right? That's
such an incredible movie.
It is such an incredible movie, and I think maybe if I had read that script initially, I would have been like, oh, who is she? You know. But then you dig into it, and it's about love and acceptance. You know, so like that's what I mean by strong universal. So I think the characters that are easier for me to fall into are the ones whose maybe universals really resonate with mine, and the characters that I have to work a little bit harder to justify are. I mean, it's always easier to work with good writing, so maybe it's just poor writing that's harder to work with. Yeah. Which is why I love like classic theater, like Chekhov and Shakespeare, because it's all just there. You don't have to work very hard for it, and I think people think that you do because. Well, Chekhov's all translations, and so I think Americans play it very non-humorous, but it's incredibly humorous. And then Shakespeare is not modern language, so people think that you have to dumb it down. But what people don't realize is that Shakespeare was writing for people who were not educated. He wasn't writing for the elite. He was writing for the groundlings. That's where the term comes from. It's the people that couldn't afford seats. So they were standing in the mud on the ground of the globe. Yeah, that's who he's speaking to, and almost all of his, like, you know, in Hamlet's advice to the players, which is, you know, Hamlet puts on a play in the play to try and catch his uncle in the lie of killing his father and marrying his mother and taking over the kingdom. And he has this speech where he gives advice to the players that he hires, and one of the things that he says is like, you know, he talks about the groundling, and you can imagine that when they did that play, everybody on the ground, the groundlings, are uneducated, and they're standing in mud. It's freezing cold. It's England. It's like, you know, and so they're saying that, and they're interacting with what's going on stage, you know, and so because they don't have an education, they don't understand. There was no the social understandings, cultural understandings of how you are in a theater was completely different at the time. So this idea that we need to dumb Shakespeare down to make it acceptable or understandable is ridiculous, because he wrote it to be understandable by people without an education. So like, where is that pride coming from that we need to like somehow make it more accessible? It's so accessible if you play it honestly, but if you don't know what you're saying, of course it's inaccessible. But like the best Shakespeare productions I've ever seen are just incredibly honest, and the universals are always there. It's family, it's money, it's love. That's it, you know? Yeah. So there's so much there to work with. Like, I think Andrew Scott said in an interview once, He was like, we don't need to shorten Shakespeare to make it more accessible. We need to play it in its entirety because Shakespeare put it all there. And I love that because he did a version of Hamlet that was the full 4 hours. And and Stephen Colbert was like, did people get bored? And he's like, no, it's an exciting play.
Wow.
It's all about betrayal, and it's all of these storylines, and you have no idea if Hamlet's crazy or not because his family thinks he is, but he's kind of this raving genius, but then he talks about killing himself, and you're like, is this guy crazy? You know, like there's just so much there, and it's so timeless. I don't remember your question.
It was about characters and what you find easier to embody, what you find harder to get into.
Honestly, it just depends on the day and how warm I am.
To make it even more of a simpler question,
sure.
Like good guy versus bad guy, kind of like, do you feel like you're drawn towards maybe a certain sphere of roles, like stuff that's more lighthearted, stuff that's darker?
I mean, I like stuff that's darker because I think that, bless you, I think that when we bring our suffering into art, it's incredibly honest. And I think that the art that people resonate with the most is honest.
Well, that's interesting that you say bring our suffering into art, because talking about the Alexander technique, you're talking about it as being this more like technical approach where you're, and correct me if I'm wrong, but like not bringing as much of your own personal, I guess like relations or thoughts, feelings, history, like memories into. Or is that a part of it? Is there space in the Alexander method for like taking the pain that you've experienced in your life and using that?
Oh, absolutely. That's what it's about. That's what it's about. Would you look at that? I can hear myself more clearly now.
That was interesting.
I wonder what just happened.
I don't know what that was.
Well, this is exciting. Wow. Such
Crazy.
Clarity.
I hope. Here, wait. Let me just pause this and just make sure that we're okay. And we're back.
Yay. Yes. There's so much space
in the Alexander technique.
That's the point. Is that you begin to that you just find an awareness for who you are and what's shaped you physically and mentally and emotionally, and that you bring it to the table so that not only you can utilize and lend yourself to whatever you're doing, but also if you have a habit or something that isn't helpful, that is inhibiting character or distracting or I don't know, like, you know, if you have like a nervous tick that you do and you're like, I know my character doesn't do that, then you become aware of it and you learn how to inhibit it without destroying it or yourself. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just the idea of being so aware of what you are that you're able to adjust it to lend yourself to a character, but you don't have to like completely get rid of it, you know? So there's so much space for that. And I think that's so important.
Within that technique, how do you portray a character that you cannot relate to on its like fundamental level? So say, for example, you are portraying a character who is like a murderer,
right? Like
a killer.
Yeah.
Obviously, you've never killed anybody, as far as I know.
And that's all we'll say about that.
How do you...
I've never killed anybody. I just feel that I need to make that really clear now.
Oh my God. How do you portray characters that like their primary attribute of the performance is something that you have never experienced?
I think that that's quite common. You just justify it.
What do you mean by that?
I just figure out the psychology behind who they are and why they would do that. Like, have you ever seen the TV show Hannibal?
No. I know. I feel like you've talked to me so much
I
about
often
this
talk
show.
about Hannibal. I talk about it so much. But that's because it's really, really smart. It's visually stunning. It's so smart. It's so well acted. It's so well written. It's incredibly compelling. It's wildly romantic. But the main character in that, he has this empathy disorder, Will Graham. He has this empathy disorder. And he works for the FBI as a teacher, but because of his empathy disorder, he can look at a crime scene and kind of backtrack and make sense of who would have made that crime scene, and that's how he profiles the criminals.
Interesting.
And so he's amazing at this criminal profiling because he kind of can perfectly empathize with who would have done the crime. But in that, he's like, oh, if I can put myself in the shoes of a monster, does that mean I am one? And that's the plot of the show. Go watch it. It's brilliant.
Yeah.
But in that way, I kind of see myself very similarly as an actor because I just look at who's on the page and I go, oh yeah, what's going on in your brain that would make you do that? And that makes sense. You know, like it's not about whether Dakota has ever experienced that or whether Dakota would ever do that or whether it feels to me to be plausible or understandable or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like, does A plus B equal C? Then that's what I'm doing. Do you know what I mean? Like it's not, I don't know. It's not wrapped up in my emotional perspective on things as much as it's wrapped up in the psychology of the human condition, which I feel like is so vast, you know?
Yeah.
There's one of my teachers has this saying, an actor is psychologist, sociologist, anthropologist, archaeologist, but never a narcissist. Like don't judge the work and don't watch yourself, but be aware that it is every piece of the scope of the human existence. And you're like digging into that. And so like sometimes like I feel like as a person, I just see people quite clearly and I'm like, oh, you must be dealing with like, I don't know, this kind of a perspective because that's how you interact with these people. And then I talk to them about it and they're like, that's exactly what it is. I'm like, well, yeah, A plus B equals C. And I have not clinical psychology training, but I have the human understanding training to get there. So it's the same with a role is I'm just going, yeah, that's justified. And if it's not justified and you have to take leaps, but you never do because you just justify it. You just make it make sense. You know, like if somebody like Christian Bale in American Psycho, that doesn't make sense, but he made it make sense. Do you know what I mean? Right. You just make it make sense.
Interesting. What's been the hardest role that you ever had to play?
Sometimes playing like a heinous bitch is hard because you have to do a lot of work to get to a point of justification that's not just archetypal. I guess maybe that's it. Archetypal characters are really hard because the trap is to play them as an archetype instead of a human being. Do you know what I mean?
Like you don't want to fall into like what's too easy. Like you want to make it human.
It's not necessarily about easy or hard. It's more about nuanced versus
cheesy,
like simplistic. Yeah, overly simplistic. Yeah. So like a character like Amanda Bynes in The Easy A lesser actor, and I am calling Amanda Bynes an absolute master in her craft. But a lesser actor would have played that, or like Regina George. That's a really easy role to play really poorly because you don't justify anything; you just play the bitch. But both of them had so much justification behind everything that they did and nuance to their characters, and like Regina George has like a vast emotional and mental life in her being, and we don't know it because of the stories about Katie, but we know that there's a lot going on there. And even like right at the end when she's like, these pants are the only thing that fit me right now, you like see a life of a character in one line where you're like, ooh, you've struggled, you know? Like, I don't know, there's just so much depth there. But I think the trap is that there's not depth and you just play mean, you know? So archetypal characters like that are a bit harder. I think for me, the character that maybe I've had the hardest time with is Alma from Summer and Smoke, because the trap is to just play her like a kind of stuck up bitch. And she's not. She's so emotional, but she feels like she can't show it. And she's like stuck in this loop of anxiety in her life. And she is constantly, you know, leaning on other people, and that's become the expectation. And so her journey is really fascinating, but I've never seen a good production of that because there's just so much nuance and it takes so much more time than I think people think. And then it's also, it's written to where you could overlook a lot of it. So it's not that it's not on the page. It's just that it takes a lot more work. You know, there's another line that one of my coaches uses, which is love takes time, love makes time. And that's just the mantra of like, do you care? then put in the 10,000 hours. Is this worth caring about? Then care about it with 100% of what you have, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's one of the strongest universals is love. So I always just try to, I think when you judge the character, you have no room to actually express them. So it's just like, you know, almost falling in love with everybody that you play because they're human and there's something to love about them. Even if they're a heinous bitch or a psychopath, there's something fascinating there.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can justify it, you won't judge it, you know?
Yeah. When did you realize how much you cared about acting?
When I was, I think 13, I had done a couple of productions in school or something. Like I was in a production in like elementary school of Cinderella and something went wrong and I got to do a bit of improv and it just lit up my soul and I was like, that was fun.
Wow.
And then when I was homeschooled, which was for most of my life, we had like a Shakespeare class that was led by like a friend's mom. And so we just got to kind of explore it, but there was no pressure. And I never really made any decisions around it. I just knew that I liked it. And then when I was 13, I was on a walk by myself because I didn't have a lot of friends and big shocker. And so I was on this walk by myself and I was just, every time that I saw something, I would just make up a story about it. And like characters and like, you know, passing this like well manicured garden and thinking about fairies or passing this cliff and thinking about, you know, a warrior or whatever. And I was like, I remember I like kind of sent up a prayer, which at that point in my life, most of my prayers were just conversations with God, and they still are, just because I didn't have anybody else to talk to. So I just kind of was always talking to God, you know? And so as much as it, I guess, is technically a prayer, it really just felt like a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, Lord, when am I going to grow out of this? You know, I am such a dork. I go on walks by myself and I make up stories about the things that I see, and I can't not, but I wish I was different. And I felt like the Lord was like, no, I made you that way. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, help me grow out of this. This is so embarrassing. And he goes, no, I made you to be a storyteller. I don't know why you're pushing back against that. And I think growing up in LA, I just figured everybody was a storyteller. And so there was nothing special about it. And I didn't choose it. It was just kind of what everybody did. And so I was like, no, I've got to do something that I'm actually gifted in. Like, I've got to find the thing that I was made to do. Everybody does this. So that's just like the standard. That's the given. But what's the thing that I do, you know? And then I met my two best friends now, Amy and Naomi, and I was talking to them in a similar passion about a film that I'd seen or a TV show or something. And I was like, you guys, this is so brilliant. I was talking about the character and I was talking about the way that the actor was portraying it, the writing and the atmosphere. And I was so jazzed. And they were like, that's great. You're crazy. And I was like, no, everybody feels this way. And they were like, no one feels that way. And I was like, what do you mean? This is the greatest thing in the world. This is the thing that makes us all feel alive, right? And they were like, no, that's a you thing. Like, we don't feel this way. And I think that I had kind of mistaken this passion for, you know, something that everybody had because my family was creative and so many of my friends were creative. But even in my family and with those friends, I now see that I have maintained a passion that they've grown out of. So it wasn't that, like, they all grew out of the walking down the street and making up stories about the trees. But that was something that I'm probably never going to lose. And so it's become this like, yeah, I'd like to make that the center of what I do. And that's what I wanted to get training in acting because I wanted to be a good actor. I didn't want to do the LA thing where I just figured I'd give acting a go. And I got 2 commercials and now I'm in Euphoria. And you're like, okay. But then like you'll watch certain actors and they play the same role in everything that they do because they don't actually have any training. They just play themselves really well. And so I'm like, I didn't want to be that. I wanted to be a really good actor because I know that it's more than just that. It's storytelling. And I think that I was drawn to acting because I'm drawn to like the human condition and psychology and understanding. And I love the ensemble aspect of being in a show with a cast of people and all of you just building this story together. And I think that there's aspects of that in writing and directing as well. But there's something about like being in the story and like you're the ones pushing it forward, and like letting it move through you that I find so beautiful. So when I was 13, I started caring more. And then when I was 14, I realized that I cared a lot more. And then when I was 16, I moved to New York.
Yeah, this is a perfect segue because I wanted to talk to you about that. You had a bit of an unconventional trajectory when it comes to like school, travel, learning. Yeah. So you went to this school in New York when you're 16, moved away from home. You moved away from your parents. Like you went to New York by yourself. So had you tested out of high school or did you go to it? Like, was this school that you went to kind of a type of high school program? Explain that all to me.
Yeah. So I was homeschooled. So most of my education was somewhere near being complete by the time that I was 16. And most of my education was unconventional. And so it was always specifically geared towards the things that I was interested in. And like, you do your like general ed stuff, but so much of my education was discussion based and Socratic and reading based because I just loved that. And so when I was 15, when I was 14, I met Tom Todoroff, who runs the studio and subsequently the conservatory. And I watched him work with some actors and really change their performance because he just drew things out of them that they had kind of been hiding in themselves. And I was like, that's amazing. That's incredible work. And then I did when I was, it would have been a year later, when I was 15, I did a monologue for him. And it's interesting talking about Alexander technique because he didn't give me a lot. Sometimes he'll work with an actor and he'll be like, what do you mean by that? You know, he'll stop. He'll be like, but what do you mean by that? Like, justify that line. You're not fighting, you know, where's the love, blah, blah, blah. He didn't do a lot of that for me. He just came up behind me and held the base of my spine up, like suspended my head. And the second he did that, emotion just flooded through me. And he was like, I need you to fight. I was like, okay. He was like, I was like, yeah, but talking about like, am I revealing or am I concealing? He's like, it's always revealing. It has to be vulnerable, has to be an expression. Otherwise it's not, it doesn't need to be in the play, you know? I was like, okay. And it was a bit from A Woman of No Importance by Oscar Wilde, the only American character. And she has this conversation with all these like English elites about work. And it's wonderful. But he was like, really fight. He was like, just yell, back row, start yelling in the back row. And I was like, okay. So I started yelling and he held up the base of my skull, which just elongated my spine. Like it just held me in suspension, which is the goal of Alexander, is to kind of suspend yourself to get to a point of freedom where you're just always there. And emotion just flooded through me. And I started like crying and like, I was like, I didn't even know I was capable of this. And so it was life-changing because I realized that there's technique that can get you to a place of freedom where you can actually express the thing that is written that is so beautiful. You can be the vessel for that. So I met him when I was 14, did that when I was 15. And then they were like, hey, do you want to come to the conservatory? And I was like, I thought I couldn't till I was 18. And they were like, well, you're homeschooled. So we would love to make space for you. And I was like, that's cool. But it would have meant moving to New York when I was 15. And I kind of looked to my mom and I was like, I don't think so. Yeah. But then I spent a year preparing myself to be able to move the next year.
Wow.
And then I did. And so.
What do you mean by preparing yourself? Like mentally? Just kind of getting ready to be like, I'm going to be a 16-year-old kid.
Yeah.
Living alone in New York.
Yeah. Financially, it was like summer classes to try and finish up a lot of stuff early. Financially preparing, taking acting classes in LA to like keep the fire going.
Did you have to do your GED in LA?
No. So what I did was, because my mom had homeschooled us for so long, she understood how to like kind of take whatever we were doing for education and translate it into a transcript for the state. So
amazing.
Partially, I was like mostly graduated by the time that I left for New York, and then partially we just did that with my curriculum for 2 years. I had classes that together with other classes could be put into the social studies category. And so that was my sophomore year of social studies. And it was, because it was theater history and film history, which is world history, because the arts always reflect what's going on in the world. So it was so much steeped in that. Yeah. And then it was public speaking, obviously. It was it was creative writing. It was research. It was history. Like we had to, for the end of my first year in conservatory, we had to go to the Met, choose a piece of art, write a monologue based on that, a character in that piece of art, dress up as that character, and then perform the monologue. And so it was like so much application of your own understanding and creativity and the things that we observe. And that was a really fun project. And I squandered it. Gosh, I squandered it. I have projects that kind of reflect that style that I'm in the midst of doing, because as much as I'm glad that I went to the conservatory when I did, and it was so right. Like people called me crazy, and for good reason. I was 16 and that was a wild decision, but it was so right. And I remember praying about it, and I was like, Lord, these things have to be lined up before I even go. Otherwise I'm not going. And they were, and I was like, that's miraculous. So it was so right. And then during my second year, the pandemic hit and we finished online, which was actually...
That is so crazy that all of this is so recent in your life.
Yeah, I know.
Wow.
It's wild that like it felt like a kick in the teeth when it happened, because the first year was so good, and we had 26 people in my ensemble, and it was so beautiful. And like 3 of my teachers this year were nominated for Tonys, and one of them won. Like these are great people, and like we worked with people who worked for the Royal Shakespeare Academy and Yale Drama School and Harvard Drama School and the Brooklyn Academy and NYU, and like great teachers who came to this conservatory because they could teach what they actually wanted to instead of being state mandated. Which I didn't get a degree, but that doesn't matter because I got an education.
Yeah.
So
how long was the program?
It was 2 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you finished during COVID.
So yeah, we finished during COVID, and that felt like I finished during 2021. I think I graduated in the spring of 2021.
Okay.
But it felt like a kick in the teeth, because I was like, I just started to settle into like my life in New York and like what it, going to Pearl Studios every day. It was so much fun. And then this global pandemic hit and stopped things and rearranged the industry in crazy ways. And then
definitely like really hit theater and film.
Yeah. And then that felt so rude. I was like, really? But then we were learning how to audition over Zoom while the industry was changing to auditions being on Zoom. So we kind of got a foot in the door as early as possible.
Yeah.
Like at the jump we were doing, because the first year of our conservatory was all theater based and the second year was all film based. So during our film year, we were adapting to what the industry now is. So our education was happening at the same time as the rest of the film industry was educating themselves on how to work in this format. Cool. So it ended up being like the best thing possible, because imagine I'd graduated in 2019 and then a year later, everything that I knew about the film industry changed, and I had to just roll with the punches.
Yeah.
So instead of that, everybody was learning at the same time. And so I look back now and think that it was a gift, though in the moment it did feel like it was going to be my downfall. But yeah, so I graduated when I was like, I was having my conservatory graduation when all my friends were having their high school graduations, which was wild. And like I graduated from conservatory. My brother is still in college and he's older than me, which is wild. But I think it honestly, it all just feels like a gift. And I love the things that I was able to learn and the ways that I still apply everything. And like even being in LA and talking to so many artists who are like moving here to do the art, about like, oh yeah, what's your technique? And they're like, I don't know, I just kind of wing it. I'm like, God, I hate it here,
Yeah. Do you feel like the attitude in New York is very different amongst actors? Because in my mind, when I think about New York, I think of Broadway and I think about the theater. And in LA, I think about film. And I feel like this is just my general guess, is that if you want to do theater, you're in New York, and if you want to do film, you're in LA.
Right.
Is that pretty much the case?
I kind of. If you want to do theater, you're in New York or London. If you want to do film, do you want to do Hollywood or do you want to do indie? Indie film doesn't shoot here as much because permits are so expensive. So it shoots in like Orange County and but then it shoots across the country and across the globe.
Yeah.
But Hollywood shoots here. And I don't want to be a part of Hollywood. I don't like Hollywood at all.
Why not?
I don't think it functions well. I mean, look at how many strikes we've had this year and how long they've lasted. The longest strikes in both SAG and WGA history.
Wow.
Hollywood doesn't, I mean, I have a resume the length of my arm, but I'm not getting jobs on set because I don't know the right people and I don't want to sell my life to the structure of Hollywood. So it doesn't, the hours are insane. The pay is so disproportionate. There's no artistry. It's all business. And I don't know that there's a lot of honesty. Like there's a handful of directors and writers that are making really honest work in Hollywood and everybody else is making money.
What's the last thing that you've watched that you feel like was a really honest film?
That's a good question. Honestly, Banshees of Inisherin.
Oh,
was so
it kills me
good.
that I can't say at this moment that I've seen that movie because I love Martin McDonough.
Yeah, Martin McDonough is brilliant. Have you read his plays?
I haven't read his plays, but Seven Psychopaths, In Bruges, and Three Billboards Outside of Missouri are all like my top favorite films. Is embarrassing. Martin, I'm sorry.
Martin, don't forgive him. Banshees was stunning and was snubbed. Martin, I'm so sorry. Banshees was brilliant and it was so honest and talk about the universal of, it was so simple. Like on paper, that is one of the most simple things ever. And then like simple stories that you could make. It's you know, a metaphor for the Irish Civil War. But like, it's not just, you know what I mean? Like some people were like, oh yeah, it's all about the Irish Civil War. No, it's not. It's about the human condition. And that's what good art reflects is honest human condition. And so like on paper, it's so simple. Two friends that one of them doesn't want to be friends anymore and the other one's confused. We've all been there. Even if it was in 5th grade, we've been there, you know? Yeah. But then the film itself is so nuanced and so beautiful and so honest and so gorgeous, stunning, like stuck with me in a way that so few films have done. Like Good Will Hunting stuck with me in the same way. You know what I mean? Like
incredible. Rest in peace.
I thought you were talking about Matt Damon. I was like, what?
You didn't hear it?
Matt Damon's dead.
Robin Williams. Oh Robin my goodness.
Williams. Yeah. So that one just really, really stuck with me. I just finished rewatching Fleabag.
I don't think I've seen that.
What?
No.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
This is one of
Fleabag.
my favorite pieces of media of all time.
Let me pull it up.
It's Phoebe Waller-Bridge, who, funny enough, Phoebe Waller-Bridge and Martin McDonough are partners and have been for a while.
Really?
Power couple of
Fleabag,
the
2016.
decade. Yeah. So she wrote this as a one-woman play that she put up for the Edinburgh Fringe, and then it got picked up for 2 seasons. And she only ever wrote 2 seasons, which is, I think, the artistic integrity that comes with that. Even when it blew up, she was like, it's a 2-season arc. That's what the story is. And she never pushed it for money, which I think too many shows do.
Hashtag Marvel.
So like, yeah, real hats off to her. But such an honest reflection of the female experience of love, of family. Gosh, talk about universal. That one, just it's so wrapped up in humor, but it's so tragically honest. And to hold both of those things as fully and well as she does is, I've never seen it done anywhere else. I think that Greta Gerwig is a hope for honesty in Hollywood because her pieces are desperately honest. She holds humor and depth really well together. And I love that that she often pushes back against the narrative structure of Hollywood. Like, what's the one? The bird. Why am I forgetting this?
Birdman?
No. Gosh, it's Saoirse Ronan. I can't believe I'm forgetting this right now.
Ladybird?
Yeah, that's the one. Dear God. I could only think of Catherine Called Birdie, which is a completely different film.
Yeah.
Ladybird. It fought the narrative structure the whole way through, which I thought was brilliant. and I hate it because it was too close to home. I was like, this is my least favorite film, you know, for a long time. And then I was like, oh yeah, all the reasons I hate it are exactly why it's brilliant. I just am pushing back against it because it pushes a button in me, not because it's poorly made, because it's brilliantly made. So I think that work like that is fantastic. That doesn't seek to approve or fill seats. It just is. And really honestly is. And Hollywood can't do that because all they care about is a paycheck.
Yeah.
Like A24 does that, and indie film does that, and theater does that. And like in New York, people just go see things. Like if there's a comedy club on the corner of the street that you live on, you're going to see comedy. Like people just go do the thing.
Yeah.
Whereas here, like every time that I've been to the Amundsen, it's like half empty.
It's because you have to drive.
Yeah, you have to drive. It's too far away. The tickets are expensive and there's so few, and you know, so I think that there's some truth to Hollywood on the West Coast and theater on the East Coast, but I think that there's more truth to like business on the West Coast and artistry on the East Coast.
Damn, that is a hot take.
That's
interesting. So why did you come back to LA? Why did you leave New York?
Because I was 17 and couldn't financially stay in freaking Washington Heights.
Yeah.
I had no support out there, so I had to come back, which is funny because I didn't have a lot of support out here either, but I did in the ways that mattered when I was 17.
Did you work at all when you were in New York, or you were full on in the conservatory?
I was able to work a little bit, but I was also, when I moved, I moved and I said, Lord, I'm not going to move if I don't have a job and a place to live. And I got a job and I got a place to live. And I was like, all right, then I guess I'm moving. And then when we landed, both of those things fell through. Like the place to live was a scam. I thought I was going to get murdered. And
damn, where were you going to live?
Oh, with this lady. But I genuinely think that there was like somebody in the next room over waiting to kill me. But the fact that I showed up with my mom, they like couldn't get us alone.
What? Where was this? Was in Los Angeles?
No. This was in New York.
Oh.
This was in New York in like the financial district. And so I was like on the plane, I was like, it's all put together, and then I land and everything starts to fall apart.
Whoa.
And I was like, God, I don't know why you brought me here just to like let everything fall apart. And the Lord was like, I just had to get you here. You said you weren't going to come if I didn't have those things.
Yeah.
That wasn't the promise. This was the promise.
Yeah.
But you had to get here, and you in your stubbornness would only get here if I, made it look like I'd already made the way, but it's the journey, Yeah. And so I then ended up living in New Jersey for too long, and I will never, ever be stepping foot in Jersey ever again.
Oh my God.
I put in my time. I'm done. And if you're from Jersey and you're listening to this, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry for you and your family. Best of luck. I just don't like Jersey. I had a really bad experience at Jersey. But then I lived in my uncle's place in Hell's Kitchen for a minute. And then,
sweet. I love Hell's Kitchen.
Hell's Kitchen is great. And then I lived in the Heights. And so I would have loved to stay out there, and the plan always was to stay out there after school. But then the pandemic hit, and it wasn't feasible for me to stay out there.
Also just wasn't the same.
It wasn't, and during the pandemic, it was weird.
Though I will say, the coolest thing that happened in New York during the pandemic was all the outdoor seating, like revolution. Because they had the coolest little like gazebos and like add-ons that were built for these restaurants that looked so much better than anything in LA.
Absolutely.
But only because like the weather is so harsh, and you have to build something that's going to protect you from the rain and the cold and the snow.
Wow,
I went. I went during it was 2021 Delta season. I think I went during like.
Oh yeah,
like
I was
just
like,
after
Delta season, the airline. No, I forgot about the
just
COVID
after
thing.
the Delta strain.
Yeah, that was tough.
Me and the girl that I was with at the time, we went to go see Moulin Rouge in New York.
But
it was like, oh my goodness.
You've seen the film.
I've seen the film, yeah. It was incredible. It was kind of a funny thing because Christian Tvet, is that how you say his last name? Tvet?
Christian Tvet? Christian's the name of the character. I believe his name is Aaron Tveit.
Aaron.
That's okay though. That's
my
okay.
correction. Aaron Tveit.
Yeah.
He was playing Christian.
There it is.
And then
he's so amazing.
Fast forward several months, I'm working in Los Angeles promoting Schmigadoon that
Yeah, he's in
also
that.
has Aaron Tveit.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, no, it was an incredible time. Incredible
It's
experience seeing Moulin Rouge. But yeah, the whole COVID thing was just a different
city.
Different city.
It was wild.
So the vaccine card, the masks, like, it's just the different,
that was hard. Yeah.
different thing. So,
I think, my ultimate goal is to get back because they're doing what I want to be doing. And even being in London this last week, I was like, gosh, just to be around something creative happening that isn't just for the views or the likes or the networking, but just to do it, just to make something is so beautiful. And that's all I wanted. I'm a storyteller. That's not the business side of things is not what I want to do art for. I'm not in the world of artistry to make money. If I wanted to make money, I'd be a doctor or a lawyer. I didn't become an actor to go make a bunch of money. I became an actor because I couldn't do anything else. This was all that
which is funny because that also is some people's perspective. Because I've heard that.
And
some people
I just disagree with
want to be actors because they want to make a lot of money.
And they don't want to work hard for it.
Which is so interesting.
Which I find offensive.
And also is possible in this city. That does happen.
Right.
That can happen.
Right.
Acting is such a fascinating, not acting itself, but the story around acting in the city of LA and how it happens for people is so fascinating to me because it's so different for everyone.
Yeah.
Even listening about how Johnny Depp got into acting and how he was friends with Nicolas Cage.
Right.
And Nicolas Cage was here to be an actor.
Right.
And he was just buddies with Johnny Depp, and he was like, "You should come.
Right.
You should just come meet my agent."
Right.
And then, just like that, they're like, "Oh yeah, let's." And I think too that he booked a show almost instantly.
Yeah. I mean, look at the guy.
But it's insane. It's insane that it happens like that for some people. And then, I brought somebody else on the podcast, Laura Patalano. She's in This Fool on Hulu. And shout out, they just came out with the second season. But she has spent 60 years.
Yeah.
Well, I guess 50 years. But she spent a good chunk of time trying, working, growing, being better, becoming a better actress.
Yeah.
To get to this place in her career where she's actually has this big role on this show.
Right.
It's just so interesting.
I think that there's a really skewed perspective in Hollywood of to make it first, to make it fast, whatever, that your worth is wrapped up in how quickly you get there, how miraculous it is, whatever, to be the youngest is to be the best. And that's so opposite to this idea of I don't know. It's just so, it puts this ridiculous amount of pressure on young people, but it also puts a ridiculous amount of pressure on literally anybody else. If you're over 25, suddenly you're not going to be the next hot new thing. And it's all about being the next hot new thing. Yeah. But within that, you lose the beauty of having experience and years under your belt and being able to lend that to the art that you do. You lose the emphasis on artistry because it's all this kind of human clickbait of are you the next big thing, the new whatever. And then there's also that I don't know if it was a study or just a conversation around the grace period that young women have in Hollywood before people turn on them. And we watched Jenna Ortega just go through it. We're watching Rachel Ziegler. What's her last name? Ballad of Songbird and Snakes, Snow White, 1,000 other things, I'm sure. West Side Story. Yep, that's the one.
I think my computer's listening. I mean, obviously it is because we're speaking with microphones, but these names are coming up instantly. I typed in I didn't even finish typing in Rachel.
Well, she's the next hot new thing, but people are flip-flopping all around.
Is it sad that I'm so not aware of this?
Well, this is also what I mean. Is is this emphasis.
I mean, she's really young. She's 22.
I know. She was in West Side Story when she was a senior in high school. Spielberg's West Side Story.
Okay.
And she's great. You know, she's got a great voice. She's, I don't know that I've seen her in a lot, but she was great in West Side Story. But like you're watching culture and society flip on these young women the second that they do something that's like out of the box that people expect them to be in. And like, you know, we've watched Taylor Swift push back against every reincarnation of that structure. And watching Olivia Rodrigo deal with it, and like all of these young people who were the next big thing, and then society gets tired of it, or you break the expectation that society made for you, and then everybody's mad at you, and blah 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 and whatever. And so just the structure that we build and the pressure that we put on young people to be something impressive, when I think that the emphasis should be on artistry and honesty. And then, you know, like all my favorite actors are like Sir Ian McKellen. Like, oh my gosh, there's nobody better. And like he's been amazing, and he'll be amazing because the artistry speaks for itself. But I think when you put all this pressure on age and being and I think this is pressure that I put on myself as well, because I moved to New York when I was 16, and I was the youngest in my class, and I was doing the thing and early to the game and whatever else. And I used to say, you know, oh, I'm 17, and people would be so shocked, and it was felt like a party trick, because I was like, oh, we're still actually putting value on something that like we're just putting so much value on the fact that it looks impressive instead of something being, I don't know, actually valuable. And so like then I turned 20 and people were like less impressed. And I turned 21 and people are less impressed. And I'm like, but that's not because I'm getting less impressive. If anything, I'm proving to be a better artist with every year. But your value of me is going down because I'm getting further away from the mark of being the young new thing. And that's stupid. You know, and I even look at like Jennifer Lawrence. She was in flipping Hunger Games when she was 19. She won her first Oscar at 22. Like, what? But she's brilliant, and she'll be brilliant, but that was like, she had that, like, you know, Silver Linings Playbook, Hunger Games, and a couple other things, and then she went quiet for a bit, you know, and like, I don't know, same with, there was somebody else that I just had in mind. Keira Knightley. She did like Atonement and the Pirates of the Caribbean and Pride and Prejudice and Anna Karenina, all within the span of like 4 years. And those are like her best work, but she's a brilliant actress, you know. She just became not impressive, and somebody else younger came along. And I think that that's stupid, because then you take away from the idea that like artistry is a journey. And like we look at painters and we look at their whole life's work, and we look at who they were when they started, and how, you know, Van Gogh's mental health and Picasso's mental health affected the work that they did. And like, you know, we take the whole life as like the journey of the artistry. And yet in the film industry, it's 4 years when you're 20 to 24, and then you don't matter anymore. But then in the theater, there's always a role for you. Like in theater, you could spend your whole life doing Shakespeare, and you will have a year, or like a role for every year of your life. So I'm like, there's something lasting about art, and yet Hollywood pushes back against that with this, you know, clickbait, I don't know, mantra or whatever. I think it's stupid.
Well, I think it also says something about society too. It says our valuation of these people that we put in high esteem. And I think in a way, maybe part of it is the fact that for most people, you know, it's going to take them a very long time to get to whatever their dream was, whether that was like owning a house or having a family or being established in your career. Like, that is not something that happens when you're 17 for pretty much anybody. Like that's not going to happen. It's going to take you like 10, 15, 20 years. If those are your dreams and those are the things you're trying to do. So I think when people see somebody who's young and they're doing something really impressive, they kind of go like all like goo goo gaga about it. Like, cause you're just like, I can't relate to that. I can't fathom that. But you're right. I mean, it does create this toxic cycle where people are just like praised momentarily and then discarded, because then there's always going to be the next new hot thing.
In the words of Qui-Gon Jinn, there's always a bigger fish. And I stand by that. But yeah, I think that when you put that into, I mean, there's always, you know, a younger what's it called when you're really good at an instrument? Like
being like a
really good
aficionado.
Yeah, there's always gonna be somebody
savant or a prodigy.
There's always gonna be somebody younger who's better because that's and not to bring it back to Johnny, but Johnny has this.
I knew it. I knew it was gonna happen. Shout out to Johnny.
How long
you know
did
who
it
you
take
are.
to get me to talk about Johnny? Johnny has this metric, and I don't know if he created it, but he articulated it, and so now it's his. But he has this metric of like, if greatness is a curve, people start at different places in the curve. So like somebody like Mozart started pretty far in the curve, so they put in a lot of work, or Mozart put in a lot of work.
But they were already
got a lot of right, exactly.
Yeah.
Whereas somebody like me, I'm nowhere near where Mozart was in music, so I could put in the same amount of effort and never make it as high. But that doesn't mean that I didn't try, right? And so when you look at it, when you look at your like 10,000 hours, and some people say this about like artists as well, and this is why Johnny talked about it, because he decorates my journals anytime that I
really
need a new journal. Yeah. So when I was younger, I feel like I have to explain who Johnny is now, just because I'm about to talk about him for 5 minutes. But he kind of implemented this idea in our minds of. It sounds like he's a cult leader.
Oh my God.
He's not.
Maybe he is.
He's my youth pastor. No, but he implemented this idea of having an everything journal, which is just like you're putting your notes and journaling and bits of poetry, ideas, game scores, a picture. You're taping things in because that's what you
your life scrapbook.
Yeah. And then you have years of
kind of like Instagram.
Yeah, but I mean,
I'm just kidding.
Did you like my face?
Yeah,
just like
you stop dead in your tracks. You're like, that's disgusting.
I hated that so much, and I was willing to go like, yep.
No, it's way better.
It's way better.
Significantly more intentional.
Exactly. But I've kept an everything journal for the last couple of years, and every time that I have a new one, I take it everywhere with me, like everywhere.
You got it with you. She's got it in the purse.
I do.
Oh, wow.
And so this is his art style. And so this is actually a riff on something from Hannibal.
Wait a minute. He drew this?
Yeah. He went to school for fine art. He has an art degree.
Oh, my God.
And he's amazing. And the way that he thinks about art is fantastic.
Wow.
But so every
looks like
time...
an album cover.
Every time that I get a new journal, he draws something on it. And it's always, relatively random or whatever. He did a piece for... when Banshees of Inisherin came out and we just couldn't stop talking about it, he did Colin Farrell on the front and then a severed finger on the back.
Whoa.
And the back it says, "You used to be nice, or maybe you never used to be. Oh God, maybe you never used to be," which is a line from the film. And so anyway, so I have these everything journals, and Johnny, who's a fine artist, he talks about how people look at art and they're like, "Oh, I could never do that." Johnny's like, yeah, with the amount of hours you put in, you could never have done that. And maybe 3 years ago, I could never have done that. But I think people underestimate the amount of time is put into art behind the scenes before it's ever shown, before it's ever given, And so this is something that I've been thinking about recently with film, is I think that on the curve of greatness, if that's what we want to call it, that should be the podcast title.
Curve of greatness?
No, it shouldn't. That's ridiculous. But on the curve of greatness, I think I've just always underestimated myself.
Yeah.
Mostly because people are impressed by me, but I'm like, I don't think that I have anything to be that impressive of. Until recently, that just sounds bad. Until I realized recently that not everybody is thinking the same way that I am about the things that I'm thinking. So the way that I interpret and intake art and the way that I'm thinking about it is just with a lot of depth and intention. Yeah. And I realized that there are artists that even actors who I'll talk to them and they're like, yeah, I love acting. And I'm like, right. And what are you making? And they're like, I don't know. Nothing's being made right now. And I'm like, but what are you making? And they're like, well, nothing. I'm like, oh, are you waiting for a job? They're like, yeah. I'm like, but don't you want to make things? And they're like, no. And that just has blown my mind. For the last year, I've been talking to more and more artists who are that way, where they're very one-minded and they're content. And I'm like, oh, that's that's great. Good for you. There's no less value in the fact that that's your track. But I didn't realize that this like breadth of interest was uncommon or less common.
What are you making right now?
So many things.
Tell me about them.
I'm working on, well, I have a short film that I've been writing had the concept for years, have been putting pen to paper for about a year now. It's close. Gosh, it's so close. I want to get it made. It's currently, I think 13 pages. I reckon it'll be about 17.
Okay.
And it walks through the idea, you know, when you like have an argument with somebody and you like replay it in your head and you think of every other thing that could have happened, or even like before you have an argument with somebody and you're just trying to like piece out what could happen and like make a game plan even though you have nothing to go off of. That's the concept. It's this couple, and we watch them have the same argument a couple of different times, and it goes a couple of different ways. And as they're arguing, as an audience member, you learn more and more about why they're arguing throughout. It's like in the middle of an argument. So you're learning more and more about the context of where they're coming from. But more importantly, you're watching these two people live in response to the lives that they've led and not actually live in reality with each other. So they're living in response to past relationships and their insecurities, and that's what's dictating the way that this argument is going, not what's being said, which is 100% true for arguments in general. It's so rarely what's actually being discussed, and way more often the things that we're bringing to the table that are volatile with the things that everybody else is bringing to the table, and a lack of understanding around them. So it's more of like a deep dive in psychology, like the psychology of the things that we hold on to and the ways that we live in response to that.
Yeah.
Which is to say, I've decided to write an impossible film, and it's proving to be that way. But I don't know. I feel like as I've been writing it, I'm like, one of the characters is just me kind of psychoanalyzing my fears, and the other character is just everything I've ever wanted to say to my mom. So I think it's helpful. And I'd love to get it made because I think it's fascinating. Like the concept is fascinating. And I like the idea that it would just be, people can kind of see themselves and maybe see the things that they're not very proud of, because like both of these characters are me split into two pieces that I'm not proud of, and so maybe they can see a reflection of something that they're not super proud of and see how it affects people in maybe ways that they're not aware of, and then decide what they want to do with that. So that's a project, and I'm really excited to get it made, but it's just proving to be bigger. Every step of the creative journey is just proved that it's actually a bigger project than I thought it would be. And then I have a TV show that I've been writing for years, but I'm actually getting really close to a pilot episode on and a pitch deck for. But I would have to sell that to Disney because they have the rights to make it.
Why do they have the rights to make it?
Because it's a spinoff on an existing show.
Okay.
It's a show that was made in 2002, ran for 14 episodes, and then it was canceled. Thank you, Fox. And it is the best show of all time, and it's criminal that all it got was 14 episodes, and then it got such a cult following that they made a film 2 years later. 2005 there was a film made, and then so many graphic novels.
What's the show called?
Firefly.
Oh, okay.
Oh gosh, Joss Whedon, 2002. So Disney bought Fox a couple of years ago at this point now, and they were like, yeah, we're gonna remake Firefly, and I was like, don't touch it, don't you dare. Don't do a thing. It is perfect. I never want to see anybody but those people play those characters, because that's who they are. That's almost 20, I guess 21 years now of those characters existing in a vacuum.
Yeah.
Don't touch them. Don't rewrite them. And like, given the like scope of certain characters, they'd have to like change things. Like Anara can't exist on Disney Plus. So don't touch it. Please don't touch it. And so, but I've had this idea. There's an episode called Out of Gas. I know this show like the back of my hand. I have the encyclopedia for this show. And there's an episode called Out of Gas where I feel like I shouldn't be putting this out there. I feel like somebody's going to steal my idea. Please don't steal my idea. I got too much of my heart in it now. There's an episode called Out of Gas that has all these flashbacks to previous moments with the crew. And one of the last scenes is the scene where our captain, Malcolm Reynolds, buys the ship Serenity. That the whole show takes place on. It's a sci-fi, sorry. It's a sci-fi Western if you don't know it. I know that sounds crazy, but go watch it. You'll love it. It is brilliant. So he buys the spaceship, names it Serenity. But there's this scene where he's in this, shipyard, and the salesman is like, treat her right, this ship will be with you to the day you die. And then he sees Serenity off in the distance, and he just knows that that's the ship. And I was curious. I've always been curious. I've seen this show since I was in second grade. I've loved this show. And so I've always been curious, like how did the ship get there? Who had it till the day they died? How did we get here? And what was life like before? And the show, the original show, takes place right at the end of this galactic war. And so I'm like, I want to see who had the ship before. I want to see who else, who did what with Serenity. I want to watch the war unfold, Yeah. So I've written a 4-season arc around the previous crew.
Sick.
So same ship, different, aesthetic.
That's really cool.
Same world, previous, potentially 13 years earlier. I'm working out the timeline, but potentially 13 years earlier. Some of the same characters, like we'll run into certain characters from the original show, and original fans will love it, but new fans will be like, who's this? Disney Plus palatable, but at the same time, a depth of the original show was kind of built based on Earth that got used up. And so the Chinese and American governments worked together to build like space stations to go out and like terraform other planets. And so it takes place in a different galaxy, and it's really fascinating. But there's a heavy Eastern Asian presence, and then a heavy Western American presence. Like I'm talking Western, like gunslinging Western.
Yeah.
And then in the original show, we got like bits and pieces of that Eastern Asian heritage. But how cool would it be to like actually get to explore that in like a Disney show in a sci-fi way, So I don't know. There's just so much there's so much built into it that would be so exciting for an audience now to like get into.
Yeah.
So that's another thing that I'm working on.
Well, it sounds also like just really salient that I feel like that theme is everywhere. Well, those two themes. First, the theme of like climate change, end of the world, we're destroying the world, we are going to leave the world and go somewhere else.
Right.
And then also two, like really salient right now is like the world getting along, and like the East and the West, and America and China. And so that seems like such a salient show.
I just feel like there's no better time to make it. And like a dream of mine would be able to use, do you know how they've been doing all the Star Wars shows on Disney Plus? In the like VR garage?
In the VR garage? No.
It's a stage, it's an LED stage. And so they get to project the backgrounds instead of shooting it on green screen and rotoscoping it in later. They're projecting the backgrounds live action.
Yeah.
And the backgrounds are moving depending on where the camera's moving.
Yeah.
And it's brilliant. And it means that there's a little bit more work on the front end, so that you don't have to rotoscope on the back. That's the best. That's the best. Green screen's the worst, and that's the best. So Jon Favreau came up with this idea, and he used it for Mandalorian, and they're using it for all the Star Wars shows, and now it's making its way into like certain Marvel things and like cool stuff like that. And so I'm like, I want to use the VR garage. My gosh. But the original show in 2002 was so practical that I'm like, I really want to use like a really good mix of practical and...
Yeah. I love practical effects.
Yeah. So that's like a big, I don't know, I'm calling it a 2-year goal, but I think it's more like a 20-year goal of getting that made, which I think would be really, really cool.
You never know.
You never know.
Do you have your Connect at Disney?
No. And then I'm also doing like mini projects. Like I have this thing that I was actually working on last night called the Art Project, which is, I love art history so much. I think it's so fascinating. And I love just like walking any city I go to whatever, museum they have there. So like when I was in London, I saw both the Tate Modern and the like National Gallery. And like anytime I'm in New York, I go to see the Met. And here I love walking around the Getty.
Awesome.
Oh, the Met's amazing. But I just love art history. And so one thing that I've begun is this, it's just an internet project, and it's mostly just to like saturate myself in the making of things in the medium that I like, and just to be making something. And so I'm choosing a handful of, it'll either be probably a mix of artists and pieces that I'm going to kind of translate to a film visual medium and expound upon. So taking works from like Van Gogh or Picasso or Caravaggio or Peter Paul Rubens, and then either conveying what the picture or what the original painting conveys, but with a different story, or doubling down on why it was made. Like so much of the Renaissance movement being, religious, what's it called? When you, my gosh, words are leaving my brain right now. But
what are you trying to explain? What's the concept?
To make people feel bad and buy into something. What's that called? It starts with P.
Penance,
no,
penitence, purgatory.
No. Propaganda. Thank you. Gosh. So much of the Renaissance era being religious propaganda of like there's this gorgeous, massive altarpiece in the Getty, and it's of Mary, and she's weeping and she's praying in front of a Bible, and I think she has a rosary, and the background is all dark. And I was like, whoa, this is like emotionally so heavy. And I was expecting it to be like, oh yeah, this is a picture of Mary's grief. And then I read why it was made, and it was... this was made so that people in the church would know that Mary was grieving over the fact that they didn't give enough money to the Catholic Church. And I was like, this is religious propaganda, but you paid so much money.
Goodness.
And this is such high artistry that now it's in the Getty and people give a shit about it, but it's religious propaganda. And so I love the idea that so much art from that period was a message, but not what art messages often are now,
Well, I mean,
just playing with that.
Even within the history of the Roman Catholic Church.
Oh, there's so much there.
Those beautiful cathedrals, which are incredible.
Yeah.
Absolutely stunning. How they were paid for?
Yeah.
Selling indulgences.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe not every single one for
Sure.
the whole thing, but like the selling of indulgences, telling people that their family members who had died were in purgatory, and that you needed to pay the church to get them out of purgatory.
It's wild.
So that they could fund all these. It's like...
Exactly. I'm like, and no wonder people are wary of religion. Like, yeah, you should be. That's pretty fair. But yeah, so just like the why behind all of this classic art that's become classic art, and like how, like, even talking about Van Gogh's brushstrokes, and like Renoir's use of light in his projects, and like the certain focuses in all of these different pieces of art, and then even looking at somebody like Picasso and going, wow, he really saw the world differently. So just applying those concepts and those thought processes to my medium of film, and creating visual pieces that could go up on TikTok and just talk about classic art and maybe bring art history a little bit more to the conversation that is happening on social media. And then, because why art is made at any given period in history, I think is such an important conversation. So just talking about why it's been made in the past and why we make art now and how it's changed and when it's changed and why it's changed and who's changed it. So bringing those conversations to light, but then also just applying the same inspiration to a different time and form.
What do you think makes art timeless?
Oh.
And I don't mean that as a general thing. I mean like specific pieces. Like there are things that are timeless. For example, if you think about like works that we would consider like classical works of art. The greats, Monet, Van Gogh, like Leonardo da Vinci, like these people, just to name a very small few.
So few.
What makes their art timeless? What makes art timeless?
I don't know. And I don't know that I don't know that I could answer that really with any kind of authority or conviction. But a vague thought that I have is around the honesty and perspective. If somebody's perspective is really personal, really provocative, really honest, and they put it out there, I think that will always impact people. And like, yeah, maybe there's an amount of skill, but the measuring of skill changes as well, because if we're going off of like a Baroque style art, Picasso has zero skill. But that doesn't mean Picasso has zero skill. It just means that we're comparing it to something that it's not meant to measure up to. So the conversation around skill that doesn't hold up. So I think it genuinely just is like a personal, provocative, passionate perspective that's really honest. You know? I don't know. But that's just kind of a vague inclination of an idea.
I have a feeling that in a way it's like a bit of a trick question, because I think there's been a paradigm shift over the last like 150 years where before that, the way that we archive things, the way that we preserve things, the way that we were able to like maintain something, there was only so much A that was made, and also B that could be preserved. And in our current, like in the digital age, there is so much made and so much preserved.
Right.
And it's growing exponentially. So, you know, when you think about the amount of music that's uploaded to Spotify every day, or the amount of hours of content that's put up on YouTube every day, it's like there's a lot of good stuff.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of incredible albums and movies and all these things that are made. And it doesn't take away from how incredible they are. But I think that maybe the whole, like the name of the game has changed. Like there was a period of time where really, I guess, maybe like the best that society had to offer like kind of rose to the top, and like you were able to fit that into a building, you know, fit it into a museum, fit it into like the consciousness of like the society.
Right.
Now it's like you have to, you're gonna have to look, you're gonna have to search, and you'll be able to find things. Like lately I've been listening to like some older music. I've been listening to like some B.B. King records from like 1969, 1970, even listening to like some old Elvis. Today when you got in the car, when I picked you up, we were listening to some Bill Withers.
Yeah, that was really good.
And I love the fact that you can go back and you can find these old gems and just like sit with those songs and be like, wow, this songwriting is just in the recording. And, you know, at the same time, how many new songs came out today? How many new hits were there this year? It's just a different way of experiencing art and creation.
Right.
So, and I don't know what that looks like in the long run. You know, I don't know, like, is there really any like one thing that represents an era?
Right.
Or is it more of like you just have to go and like search through the archives? Right. You got to scroll through iTunes. You got to, you know, I don't know. But I do know that it's changed dramatically.
Yeah.
Because life has changed dramatically. Not the universals.
Sure.
Love, family, money, all those things. Yeah. But the life that we're living in many ways is different than the life that we lived 10 years ago. Is substantially different than the way that our parents lived before cell phones and Google Maps, and is enormously different than the life my grandfather lived when he was waiting for the wagon to come to his village to bring ice in Belarus.
Whoa.
You know, like, and that's in a lifetime. Right. That's in one person's lifetime. That much change has happened.
That's wild.
Yeah.
Ever evolving. Which I think just goes back to like, if the game is constantly changing, then what's the what's the guarantee? Like what's always gonna land? And I think that that's just honesty. Like having a perspective and communicating it honestly is a consistent thing across all mediums, across all times, across, you know, I just think that like there's so little guaranteed, and so to just be honest is the only thing that I like. I can't guarantee that my art will be successful. I can't guarantee that it'll even get, you know, picked up, or that anybody will ever call me great. And I don't know if I need that, because I just want to be. Oh God. Not again. Oh, it's back.
What are you doing over there?
I'm just playing with
Are
my...
you playing with the cord?
I'm playing with my cord just a little bit.
That is what's going on, Dakota.
That might be it. Anyway, yeah, honesty. What, you expected me to sit still?
Oh my God.
Funny.
Look at that wave.
I know, I'm sorry.
Look at that wave right there.
I'm sorry to everybody out there. I apologize.
So funny. Yeah, honesty. What does success look like for you as an artist?
Unattainable.
No.
Maybe.
Far from unattainable.
I don't know.
It depends how you define it. I mean, if you define it as
making money and having a, impact connected to your name, then I don't know. I've been asking myself this a lot recently because I don't want to be famous. That sounds exhausting.
Why do you not want to be famous?
Because it sounds exhausting. It sounds like a lot of pressure and it sounds really exhausting. But I would love my art to get funded. I would love for people to be impacted by my work.
Mm-hmm.
I would love, there's a lot of pride in me that would love to be recognized as impressive. And for, the people that called me crazy growing up can go, whoa, look at that kid. They actually ended up doing something with their life. There's all that pride and
mm-hmm.
arrogance and hope that comes with it. And, the ego that I'm constantly trying to kill. But and then the other side of that coin is like, it'd be nice to like have my name mean something and like have my art seen and appreciated. But if, I know loads of people that didn't like Banshees of Inisherin, and I think they're crazy. But that's just because it wasn't their thing.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry, Martin. Again, I'm really sorry. So it's I just don't know. I don't know by what metric I want to measure success
mm-hmm.
personally. And I don't know, like, for me, maybe success is just doing it. Maybe I'm successful if I just have the courage to follow through,
Mm-hmm.
If I just make my things, no matter who sees them, no matter, who funds them. Because I think in my life, I guess half of my ambition comes from like 75% comes from actually making something really great and really beautiful and having so much skill and artistry and honesty in my perspective and doing it and getting it out there and having it be beautifully cohesive or like not cohesive, but in a really intentional way. And like, just to making really impactful art. And by impactful, I just mean honest. Like
mm-hmm.
I don't know if it can not be impactful if it's really true and you're digging into the, your own inner life or the inner life of something really, really true. It's going to impact somebody, even if it's one person.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like that's part of the goal. But I think the other part of the goal is to like build a team of people that want to do it with me and like utilize different perspectives and like grow an arts and entertainment, like community of people who are really great at what they do, have a lot of passion behind it, and want to see the world impacted positively because of it, and create jobs and create new structures for the film industry that are really, where a woman's never going to be asked, oh, so when are you going to stop your career to have a family? And that's not the pressure, because that's ridiculous. Like I hate that that's a standard, and I hate that that's a conversation, and not a conversation, that it's an expectation. And so, but that's because the film industry isn't sustainable. And so, it's hard to hold those two things at once, but I know people that are doing it, and they're not giving up on either of those things. So to create some sustainable community around creativity and where everybody's perspective gets to be utilized, and it's not just the director's vision goes and that's it. It's like, whoever has the best idea, let's do that,
Mm-hmm.
and where we all kind of, and I guess this is part of my perspective, just having done everything, because I've worked on a film set in every capacity. I've been on a sound team, camera teams, I've been editing, I've been grip, lighting, I've been, DP, script supervisor, continuity, acting, you name it, I've done it. And
mm-hmm.
so producing, pre-production, post-production, all of it. So I think within that, and then within the realm of directing, you're always thinking about, and writing, you're always thinking about the writing and the acting and the sound design and the music and the costume. And like, so I just think that my perspective is so wide, it has such a wide range that of course I'm thinking about like, yeah, who else can we bring to the table? Who else's perspective can we utilize? Who wants to lend themselves to this project? And how can I find people that are really, really great at what they do, and we can create something beautiful and cohesive and impactful and honest and do it together, and everybody uplift each other, and people whose voices deserve to be, you know, gosh, words are escaping me. People whose voices deserve to be heard get to like have their voices projected. So that's like part of the goal, is like to create a community of people that want to do it together, and like and then to create beautiful things. So in that, the question was success. So maybe that's success for me.
Is doing
like
the thing.
Just doing the thing and doing it with people who care as much as I do.
Yeah.
And finding those people, and like, you know, giving people who don't have a resume the length of their leg and connections across the universe a chance, because they deserve a chance, because their artistry deserves a chance, not because they have enough connected to their name. But, you know, giving people the chance to experience, you know? And so I think that if I could do that, that's really successful, become parts of communities and ensembles that are like just working together to create beautiful things and give people the space to do it. That would be a successful life for me. Making money because of it would be really nice, you know?
Of course, yeah.
But I think if that's what I'm measuring success on, if I'm measuring success by other people's interpretation of my work, then it's never going to be successful, because nobody's ever going to be pleased. And I think provocative work isn't going to please everybody. And that's another thing that I don't like in Christian artistry, is like they move towards sanitization because provocative is somehow bad, that they forget that like the Bible isn't sanitized and life isn't sanitized.
Absolutely not.
So why are we sanitizing the work that we do to make it palatable for 5 people? Like I'd rather have it reach people who care, and rub some feathers. Like, yeah, I don't mind, you know? So that would be success for me. And letting that be sustainable, you know, not burning people out on the work that we do, but being able to like sustain each other and ourselves with our art. That'd be nice.
Yeah.
But that feels like it will never happen.
I mean, I think it's always daunting when you have a dream. It's daunting, it's intimidating, because it seems so big.
Right.
But I think that I actually feel the same way as you do about success. Success to me is about bringing the things from my mind into the world.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah.
That's it. If I can do that, then I'm happy.
Right.
Like if it strains me to my physical limits or my financial limits, maybe even my mental limits, I don't care.
Right.
Like whatever it takes to bring that thing out into the world, to like birth it, to give birth to it.
Right.
Yeah. And maybe that results in financial success. Maybe it results in financial strain. But what I know for sure is that if I don't do that, if I don't give it everything that I can to make it happen, I'm just going to live the rest of my life thinking about that thing and wishing that I had done it.
Right.
And there's also too a level of, I mean, it's really interesting. Like success, there's multiple categories, I think, because there's the inward out, and then there's the outward in. Like how I view myself, how I feel about myself versus how others view me. Those interplay, because like how others view me will affect my state.
Sure.
There's just like, am I able to take care of myself? Like, did I make enough money this month to pay rent?
Right.
Like, did I do these things to just hit the minimums?
Right.
Versus like can I sleep with myself at night? Like, can I sleep with myself with night? Like, am I doing something that is deeply dissatisfying because it's not what I was put on this earth to do.
Right.
Versus like, I didn't make rent this month.
Right.
Because I'm doing the thing.
Right.
It's such a crazy balancing act that I think all creatives are in that balancing act. They're on that trapeze.
100%.
Or that tightrope. You know, they're like, they're walking on that rope.
Yeah.
Just trying to make it across.
Yeah.
And it's difficult.
Yeah.
It's difficult. I don't know that there's any one right answer either, because I think that it works out differently for different people. And it's also context specific. Like what we have to do when we live in LA as a creative is going to be different than what you have to do when you live in, I don't know, Nebraska. In Lincoln, Nebraska.
Right.
Or Detroit.
Right.
You know, like, it's expensive to live in this city.
Yeah.
Hence why you have so many creatives who are working in catering and brand ambassador work. And
I think that, like, I mean, even on that topic, like, the hospitality industry lends itself so much to creative work because you just see people, you know? You see people, you meet people, you see the worst of humanity sometimes.
Yeah.
So, like, even that is, like even what I'm doing right now, I'm like, I'm not upset by the fact that I'm not making money off of my art because the things that I'm learning in my life are lending themselves to who I'm going to be as an artist and who I am as an artist. So I don't think that's bad. And even talking about the idea of, like, would I rather not make rent or not be able to sleep with myself at night is like, and like talking about, you know, the success of artistry and like having it reach people. When I was, I think 14, I was part of this, and I think I've told you this story. I was part of this creativity conference, ironic, because I just came back from one. But in like Ojai, it was this like creatives retreat, and there was, on the last day of the retreat, there was this showcase of artists doing things, and lots of people performed, lots of like a DJ performed, and you know, poet had written something and whatever else, and I was asked to write an original piece on the dual voices in a creator's head of inspiration versus doubt. And I was like, well, I got plenty of the second one, so let me get at it. And so I wrote this piece that was like kind of spoken word with my ukulele. Who knows what it was, really. Heavily inspired by 21 Pilots. But
I love it.
It was really, I enjoyed the process of writing, and I put a lot of pressure on it. And like, even like, Claire Rosencrantz performed, and she's now huge, but this was back when we were just kids, you know? And so it was just all of this like creative energy in a room. And then there was going to be this like keynote speaker. A guy, I don't know if you've heard of him, Ewan McGregor.
Ayo.
And I was like,
I have heard this
I was
story.
like, oh shoot, I'm going to have to perform in front of Ewan McGregor. I don't want to do that. That's my hero. That's Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Yeah.
And so, so I get up there to do my thing, and my ukulele freaking, like, I plug it in, and it just, the sound system pops, and I was like, gosh, I'm already failing at life, you know? And I remember just kind of,
oh my God.
A teacher of mine once said, and she might have gotten this from somewhere else, but a teacher of mine once said, accept everything, deny nothing, invent nothing, as like a rule of life, and especially a rule of arts. Accept everything that's going on. Don't deny that anything internally or externally is happening, and don't try and invent what you don't have. And so I was like, well, I have to accept that I'm incredibly nervous. I can't invent confidence that I don't have, and I can't deny that I am in a state. And so I like start the song, and at the end of the chorus, like one note rings out, and I like missed a finger, so it buzzed, and I was like, oh, I've never felt worse about myself in my life.
Oh my God.
And it was terrible. And the first verse is all about like the inspiration we have, and the second verse is about feeling less than adequate. And then the third verse is about kind of accepting that you have what you have, and you bring it to the table or you don't. And so as I'm going through the second verse, I'm like, I'm the worst person that's ever been alive, you know, on the planet. And then by the end of the second verse, I've kind of burned off all my nerves, because I'm like, well, there's nothing left to lose. And so the third verse, I've become very confident, and like it kind of, my emotional journey took the same journey as the song. And I was like, wow, well, Lord, if one person gets anything out of that, that will be enough for me. I don't have to wow this entire audience. If one person walks away from this conference going, those were the words I needed to hear, good enough, you know? I accepted everything. I didn't deny anything, and I didn't invent something. And so I was honest, and that's good enough for me. So I sat down, and they had like a little interlude between the creative works and the panel with Ewan. And so then we were all shaking hands, and people were like, that was so impactful, thank you. I'm like, oh, look, 1. And then somebody else came up, they were like, that was so impactful, thank you. I was like, 2. Sick. That's higher than I was shooting for. Amazing. And by the end I was like, well, it went how it went, and I don't care. And so I sat down, and Ewan McGregor gets up there, and a woman named Melissa Disney was interviewing him, and she was for a while like the voice of the Oscars and the voice of
her last
the
name is
Globes.
Disney.
Yeah, Melissa Disney. She's now welcome to the stage. She's amazing. She's so sweet.
Wow.
And so she was interviewing Ewan, and she was like, "Hey, welcome. Thank you so much for being here." And I was like, "Oh, thank you so much for having me. It was really incredible to watch everybody do their thing. You know, there were musicians, there were all sorts of artists."
Yeah.
And so he was like, "It was really, really beautiful to like see everybody bring their artistry to stage." And then he points at me and he goes, "But what you had to say, I thought was particularly profound." And I'm just like, "Oh my God, Ewan McGregor is looking at me."
Wow.
And he goes, "If I had known what you were singing about when I was your age, I would have hit things in my career more quickly because I would have had more courage." So he was like, what you had to say was so profound and so inspiring. And he's like, I directed my first, or I've in the process, maybe he was in the process at that point. He's like, I'm just beginning to get into directing, but I've always wanted to direct, and I just have never had the courage to do it. But it's because of, I finally got over the voice of doubt and like leaned into the inspiration that I'm even able to take this step. So I wish that I'd known that sooner. Thank you so much for sharing. And I was like, when I thought if one person gets something out of this, I was not thinking the one person would be Ewan.
That's crazy.
But I was looking at him going, you've been in some of my favorite films.
Yeah.
And he's still has such an incredible career and will probably be working forever. He's amazing. But the way that he measured his own success was, am I doing the things that I want to be doing, or am I letting doubt rule my decisions?
Yeah.
And that's Ewan McGregor. That's Obi-Wan Kenobi. You know what I mean? So I'm like, okay, you know, I just did this thing because the person putting it on was a friend of mine and was like, you should do a piece for it. And I was like, I'm not qualified to do a piece for it, but I was honest and I had a personal perspective and I brought it to the table and I did it. And that was successful, you know, and a handful of people thought that it was impactful enough for them to like draw inspiration from it. Yeah. So that's successful. But then hearing his response to that measured success being his feeling of a lack of measured success internally, I think it helps to kind of restructure that idea of what success is. Because it is ultimately, am I going to be able to sleep with myself at night, or am I going to be so upset that I didn't at least try, you know?
Yeah. Do you care if we take a real quick pause?
Is it going?
It's going.
Oh, it's just
I know,
so
it's so tiny.
It's so little.
There we go. Okay, we're back. Okay, you know what's funny? I was thinking about this with this book that we were reading
It is Stay Alive.
the beginning.
Yeah.
I have seen that book in movies. Like,
no.
That book on like tables, like in a scene.
I mean, it's an aesthetic book.
Definitely one movie, but I feel like maybe even more.
What one movie?
Also recently.
What movie?
It's going to drive me nuts. I'm not going to be able to remember it, but I've seen How to Stay Alive in the Woods.
Lying.
No, this is the truth. This is the honesty. So
it's a good book.
I don't know. There's something about it that just, it also was this, like the third thing you noticed on the bookshelf. It is at eye level.
That's true. Well, it's also green, and I am drawn
and orange.
to
There's a lot of green. There's literally a green book right beside it that you were not drawn to.
Well, let me tell you why. Because the title is in something akin to Comic Sans, and I refuse to read Comic Sans.
There's also that one, How to Build a Motorcycle.
Yeah, but that's
like a baby. It's like
can't see that. That's nice and clear. If you want to know how to survive in the woods, that they made that clear for us, which was really good. If you are scanning a bookshelf, you're gonna
you know what
find
they should have done though?
It's important.
Those letters should have been like in that reflective kind of like, so you could see it at night if there was like, you know, a little easier to. That's some real.
Oh, they really missed out.
That book is meant to survive.
That's true. I didn't love. I mean, hey. If Brandon's listening to this, don't.
I hope he is. Should I invite him on the podcast?
Yeah, absolutely. I gotta hear his thoughts behind surviving in the woods. How do you? do you go through an experience and write a book like that? Or do you think about it enough? Like, how was this man raised? You know what I mean? That's what I'm wondering. Has he had to stay alive in the woods?
It's a good question. Have you watched that show, Naked and Afraid?
Yes. But not a lot.
Yeah, I haven't seen it a lot either. But some of those people, there was one character. Who, I guess
aren't they real people?
It's a real person. There's one person. It's reality TV. It's all fake.
Is it?
That one seems pretty real.
That one does. There's a couple that seem really
How much
real.
realer can you get than putting two people naked on an island and being like, good luck?
Ugh. That sounds like a nightmare.
There's one of them that I found her Instagram, and she's like an actual survivalist. Like everything she posts is like...
That sounds like she found the right show.
Well, okay, I think I watched a few episodes of that show, and it typically seemed to be that they would put like a really dumb dude with like a really savvy girl.
So they just put men and women together?
Touche. I think they knew exactly what they were doing. I think probably they found this girl and were like, she's going to kill it. We'll put her with this dude who like you think would be good. Like in one of the episodes, it was a guy who was like a big ex-Marine guy.
Oh.
And he surprised,
that
big
shocks.
Surprise, he sucked. He was not good.
I feel like if you have Marine training, like, shouldn't you know a little bit?
Raises some questions about that training.
I mean, yeah. Nothing, no new questions, but just the same ones that I always wonder about when thinking about our government.
Oh my God. Yeah.
America.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about your tattoos.
I'm okay with that.
Sick. How do you feel about acting and being tattooed?
Oh.
Do you ever worry about that?
Well, I asked one of my professors in school once, like, we had an acting as a business class. And I was like, do tattoos matter? And they were like, not anymore. And I was like, oh, really? They were like, nobody cares. You know, you're going to get some makeup to cover it, and you can buy it yourself and cover it. Like, you can wear a long sleeve, you know, whatever. So I just kind of always held that in the back of my mind as like, it doesn't matter. It's not going to inhibit my ability to get a role.
Yeah.
I think about it a little bit more with theater, just because sometimes tattoo cover-ups don't look that real. And so I think a little bit more about that. But then I've seen plays where the actors don't cover up their tattoos. Like I saw Tom Hiddleston and Zoe Ashton and Charlie Cox in Betrayal on Broadway, and Charlie was, you know, sporting his tattoos, and it wasn't distracting, and it wasn't, you know, any more impactful than, it didn't take away from the thing. So I think a little bit about that. And then I think the main thing that I think about is like, these are all really personal to me, and I don't know, there's part of me that's like, thinks about the perception of like, you don't know me and you don't know my story, but you're looking at my art, and like, I don't know, just people judging the like, oh, I don't like her tattoos. I think just because I like hold so much pressure on myself to be likable by people, I think I'll think about that more often than anything else.
About whether or not to get a tattoo?
About like, or sometimes
showing off a tattoo.
Yeah. But ultimately, that's ridiculous. So,
How old were you when you got your first tattoo?
I think it was 2 weeks before my 18th birthday.
Okay.
So I waited as long as possible, as long as I could. And it was this one, and it was also my tattoo artist's first tattoo on another person, because it was my friend's dad.
The cross?
Yeah. That's why it looks like a prison tattoo, but I like it.
It's pretty sick.
And it doesn't have to
be... pretty badass. Badass cross.
Yeah, and I think the lack of perfection around it kind of continues to further the symbolization, or the symbolism. So, but this was like his fourth tattoo on another person. So I'm like, bro, that learning curve was impeccable, you know?
That's kind of cool though, to have tattoos from somebody who's learning and have multiple to actually see the progress of it.
Yeah, I'm like a walking canvas for that guy.
Walking billboard.
Yeah.
Advertising for him.
Yeah.
Want to give him a shout out? Yeah,
Eric Corbett. He's sick. He's an entrepreneur and an architect and innovator. He's just super cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you hope to tattoo on yourself going forward?
My next design, I was thinking about this morning. My next design, most of my tattoos have to do with pieces of art that have been really important to me. So a lot of them have to do with music or literature. And my next tattoo, and I have an artist, I just don't have the money.
Okay.
But I will get the money, and I will
Who's
hit
the
up this artist. His name is Wes. I'm trying to remember what his Instagram handle is. He's amazing. I think he's based in Venice. He's incredible. And he does this like gorgeous thin line stuff, but he also does really incredible stipple shading, and that's the style that I want.
Yeah.
And then he also does some really intricate stuff with like mixing like heavy line work with stipple shading, which is what I want.
Cool.
So it's this. There's a painting on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. It's there's the creation of Adam, which is the hands touching, and it's classic and whatever. Next to it, there's the creation of Eve, and she is like has this like prayer posture towards the Lord, and the Lord has this like his hands just kind of there, but there's this like visual that's really, really stunning. And so I've taken that and I kind of sketched it out a little bit, like it was like with guidelines, and like it's not quite finished. And I have the lines, "Oh man is a giddy thing," next to it. And so with it, I'm trying to convey that let's like all of the shape of the hands is going to come from stipple shading, and then the guidelines are going to be the only actual line work to create kind of this like it's clearly not finished, and the journey is like the process is happening. And then "Oh man is a giddy thing" is a line from a Mumford & Sons song. Mumford & Sons was the first ever secular music I remember liking.
Whoa.
I heard The Cave when I would have been so young, like 7, but I heard The Cave driving back from the beach in a friend's car. And The Cave came on, and at that point in my life, I thought that songs were about two things: God or dinosaurs. So I was like, "This is dinosaurs." So I said, "This was a dinosaur song." I was homeschooled, guys.
What dinosaur songs were you listening to?
There was this like when I was in preschool, there was this like learn about the dinosaurs CD that we had, and I still remember so many of those songs and like all the different dinosaurs. I had a song.
Stegosaurus.
No, but the Stegosaurus one went, "I am a Stegosaurus. I'm a funny looking dinosaur. And on my back are many bony plates, and on my tail there's more." I kid you not, I played this on repeat as a kid. I loved dinosaurs.
Oh my goodness.
This is so bad. Anyway, so I was in the car with some friends, and I was like, "Oh, this song's about dinosaurs." Because he goes, "Come out of your cave, walking on your hands." I was like, "That shit's about dinosaurs, bro." Never knew who it was. Never knew where it came from.
Yeah.
So then for years, I was like, "Oh, remember that one song about dinosaurs that you heard a long time ago? That was good. That was fire." And then I heard it years later, not that many years, but like maybe too many years. And I went, "Oh my gosh, this is a dinosaur song." And then I listened to it and I was like, I think it's actually about God. So I was like, I was right. It did fall into one of the two categories. It was just the wrong category.
That's
but
so funny.
Then I fell in love with Mumford & Sons and folk music as a whole, and just like the imagery that comes with folk music, and the sound that like I feel so resonates in who I am. So Mumford & Sons has always been huge for me. But then they have a song called "Sigh No More." And I love the bridge. The bridge goes, "Love that will not betray, dismay, or enslave you, but will set you free to be more like the man that you were made to be." And then it goes, there's a design and alignment, a cry of my heart to see the beauty of love as it was made to be. I love that imagery, and I love those lines, and I love the implication of it. And so I created this piece of based on the creation of Eve that kind of furthered that idea of love and a journey and unfinished and becoming the person that you want to be, and like the engine behind it all being love. And then right before the bridge in that song, they repeat the line, "Oh man is a giddy thing." And so that's why that came in. But it's this like sketchy, shading and like the like super clean words, and I don't know where it's going to be, but somewhere probably on this forearm. And so that's my next piece, and I think about it all the time because I love the design. I love coming up with the design. I was once talking to Johnny about it because he has Mumford & Sons lyrics right here. He has the lyrics from the cave, actually, I will know my call despite my faults and despite my growing fears.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked him about it once, and he goes, I wish that I'd come up with something to visually portray those words instead of just getting the words. And so that's the way that I think about my tattoos now, is like, if there's words that I find impactful, which is typically what I do find impactful, is like a phrase or some poetry or words, the songs, the literature, whatever it is. Let me come up with something that visually portrays what that, like visually conveys what that's trying to say, and get that piece of art, because then it's not just somebody else's words, it's the way that it hits me. Do you know what I mean? So like, that's what this is, which this is based on Half Alive song, where the lyrics go, I'm creation both haunted and holy, made in glory, even the depths of the night cannot blind me when you guide me, creature only. And so I was like, oh, I got that, like haunted versus holy, and like the idea of like, you know, the echo of what is and what will be, and the creation and all of those things. And then same with this being for the song Taxi Cab, and so just, and like this being for Greta Van Fleet. And so it's always just been like, oh yeah, what's something that I can come up with that will visually express the way that those words make me feel. And so the next thing that I'll get is Mumford & Sons.
Sick.
Yeah.
I feel like we could do a whole other podcast just talking about music.
I agree. Oh my gosh. So much to say.
Yeah. We should probably wrap it up soon, but maybe as like a teaser. One thing that I absolutely love talking with you is just how deeply passionate you are about so many things, because the way that you describe it, with the level of enthusiasm, the level of depth, the level of touch points that you're able to bring it in together is so beautiful, so fascinating.
Thank you.
When it comes to music, and this is such a hard question, so I'll leave it a little bit open-ended, but like, what are one song or maybe like a collection of songs that have been the most impactful in your life?
Yeah, that is a really hard question. Oh gosh.
Could also be an album.
Yeah,
like,
fair.
Take it as like broad as you need to.
Did you know that I have only considered myself a musician for the last couple of weeks because of something that you and Nick said to me?
Oh shit. What do we say?
I never said, I always would say, oh yeah, I do music as a hobby, but I'm not a musician. And then it was when Nick was talking about potentially playing the troubadour. And I was like, oh, you guys would play the troubadour? And he goes, no, the three of us. And I was like, no, I wouldn't. And you guys both went, no, you're in the band. And it was the first time that I ever was like, oh, I'm in the band. Like,
Hell
but
yeah.
actually, because until I think then, I was like, oh yeah, my friends invite me to play with them because they think that I'm fun, but not because I'm good or valuable. And then y'all said that, and I was like, oh wait, maybe there is something actually really beautiful about this trio, and there's a reason that I'm a part of it.
There's
Anyway.
100% a reason that you're a part of it, because you're amazing.
Well, thank you.
It's because when we sing three-part harmonies together, it
is transcendent.
Glorious.
It's really beautiful. But that was the first time that I was like, oh wow.
Wow.
So then now people are like, so what do you do? And I'm like, well, I also do music. And they're like, oh wow, what do you do? And I go, I just play for other people, but I kind of do music. Anyway, so in the conversation of music that's impacted me, I would say that, oh gosh, there's a song called I Will Wait, not by Mumford & Sons. Maybe it's called Wait For You. It's by Will Reagan, a Christian artist. I've struggled with anxiety for most of my life in a really, really severe way. And that is one of the only songs that has ever helped to subside my anxiety. So when you said, just like when you posed your question, for some reason, that was the first thing that I thought of. But there's a line, the first line is, he goes, I will wait for you there down on my knees where I met you. Life left me broken and bare, but you are the hope that I cling to now, or something really close to that. And just that idea of like constantly finding hope when you're at the end of yourself and coming back to your knees, because it's this posture of surrender and this posture of like, okay, I'm actually gonna let go. I'm done trying to control it, because I really can't. I'll just actually just move with it. So that is up there pretty high for me, I think. probably The Cave by Mumford & Sons has just always been held a lot for me. Guaranteed a handful of 21 Pilots songs, just because they helped me get through a really tough time where I felt really lost within myself, and I resonated with a lot with the things that they were singing. And I really appreciated that. And then it was also some of the first music that I chose, because growing up in a conservative Christian household, don't judge me.
I love that you look directly at the camera.
I just know that I've grown. But growing up in a conservative Christian household, I think that there were a lot of things that were given to me, and I thought that they were mine. But then I discovered like 21 Pilots and honestly like a whole emo scene, and I was like, this is mine, and nobody else likes it, which means it's just mine. And it was the beginning of kind of my own like personal self-discovery. There's an album called Miles and Years by Ali Page, and that has been pretty consistently on my, like, what I'm listening to for the last year, if not year and a half or two. Stick Season by Noah Khan. I don't think I just have no words. I genuinely think it's a masterpiece. And I feel myself in it. I see myself in it, and I love it. And it's just so incredible. And then probably like Inland by Leif Vollebæk, his first album. There's just something there that just really like hits my core every time that I listen to it. And then bits and pieces of a lot of things, like lots of soundtracks as well, and like songs from shows or films or other things, but like the song Dawn from Pride and Prejudice. Oh my gosh, the 2005 Joey Wright Pride and Prejudice is, I think, a true masterpiece, and the music from that holds so much atmosphere for me and is just transportive. So I don't know, there's so much there, and it is really, really impossible to choose. Are
you looking at your Spotify right now? I was gonna say we should almost do another podcast as soon as Spotify Wrapped 2023 comes out, just to go over Spotify Wrapped.
I think I can call my Spotify Wrapped now. Can you tell, like, do you know what's going to be on your Spotify Wrapped? Because I think I know what's going to be on mine.
Oh, that's so tough. What's going to be on yours? Top 5 artists.
Top 5 artists? I don't know what order. Yeah, I do. No. I don't know what order. But it will be Hozier, Noah Khan. I think it will be... I think Richie Mitch and the Coal Miners is going to be on it, and I think Bruno Major is probably going to be on it. And then who knows? One spot for who knows. And then songs, I reckon that Would That I is going to be on there. I think Unknown by Hozier is going to be on there. I think Paul Revere by Noah Khan is going to be on there. I think, honestly, there might be a couple of songs from Folklore, Taylor Swift on there.
Okay.
Which I've just been really loving. And probably Evergreen by, or what's that song called? Wow. I know it like the back of my hand, but don't know the name of it. I think I'm right. Yeah, Evergreen, Richie Mitch and the Coal Miners. Either Evergreen, Lake Missoula, or Laramie. But it will definitely be Richie Mitch, Hozier, Noah Khan. And yeah, I could put a lot of money on that right now.
Okay, you're gonna have to listen back to this.
I think Noah's probably gonna be my top artist, just because Stick Season's been comfort music for however long it's been out, but then also he released the deluxe edition. But then Hozier also released Unreal Unearthed, and gosh, that was unreal. Pun fully intended.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, but definitely those 3 artists.
Okay. I think mine is going to be a wild card. Like, I really...
we said really at the same time. That was wild.
Jinx. Nothing stands out to me off the top of my head that I've, like, been obsessed with this year. Last year was different because I was building my van, and I had a lot of time to listen to a lot of podcasts.
Right.
Okay? and then a lot of albums of like I listened to a lot of Daniel Romano last year.
Oof.
A lot. And a lot of Chris Stapleton.
Fair.
So I don't know. I'm actually really curious to see it because I think I might be shocked. I might be like, I don't know what to expect.
You know what?
I wish I could pull up my Spotify. I don't know that if this Spotify is the same as my phone. Oh, it is. It is.
You know what actually might be on
Does it tell me my most played?
Top albums is Ivan Thiva released this, I kid you not, 2 months ago, called Gardens. And I think for a week I didn't listen to anything else. And I listened to it for like 4 hours a day, every day. A friend helped produce it and helped write it. But it's so beautiful. Gardens by Ivan Thiva. I think I'm saying your name right, but my friend Connor helped make it, and I was really beautiful. I would love it if that were on my, somewhere on there. Oh, who's probably going to be my last artist spot?
Who?
Gregory Alan Isaacoff, because he released an album this year as well, and that was transcendent.
I think I only know one artist that might be on mine, and it's this girl named Lupa, and she's like a DJ producer.
Sick.
And I just went through a big Lupa phase this year where I was blasting that music. She has this record out called Salivation, I think.
Ooh,
Lupa. Shout out to Lupa. What is it called?
I'm trying to see if I know this person.
She's not huge. She's definitely not huge. But she's an awesome artist. Does like really intense, like deep house
kind
of
fun.
stuff. Why am I not seeing her freaking? Where's this album? Show All. Oh, here we go. Here it is. Salivation. It's only an EP, but yeah, this stuff is intense.
Wow.
This stuff is hard hitting warehouse type music.
Wow. We love it.
Definitely went through a big phase of that this year. But like I said, it's been a random year. So we'll see. Dakota, we probably got to wrap this up. I got to get you home. So what are you cooking for Thanksgiving?
I am, woof. I'm making I came up with this recipe for Brussels sprouts. I love making Brussels sprouts. So I have a handful of recipes. But it's this pomegranate rosemary Brussels sprouts.
Sounds so good.
And it's you cook it with like I made this like pomegranate reduction and then cooked the Brussels sprouts as I usually do with like olive oil and garlic and onion powder and salt, pepper, handful of chili flakes, lemon, and then I added rosemary and then the pomegranates as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then I cooked it, and when it was done, I topped it with honey, with wild honey, and the wild honey brought out the floral taste in the rosemary.
Yeah.
And it was wild. It was so good. I was like, holy crap.
Yeah.
So I'm going to make that because I've become a favorite recipe of mine. And then I am making some bread.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm excited to eat it in a couple hours.
Yeah. Not that many. Not a lot of hours. And you're bringing what? Charcuterie?
Yeah, I decided to keep it simple. I brought ham last year, and that ham was insane.
Do you know that last year I got home, went to bed, woke up in the middle of the night, was throwing up all night?
No way.
Yeah, and then I had to shoot a short film the next day.
Did you eat ham?
I did not.
Okay, so it wasn't my ham.
No,
it wasn't my ham.
I don't know what it was, but I was miserable, literally all night long. And then the next day I woke up at 8 a.m. and I had a call and they were like, are you ready to shoot at 10?
Oh my God.
And I was like, yeah, I'm going to just rally and I'm going to do it. And so I shot this short film. It's called Clementine. You can watch it. It's on my YouTube. And I was so nauseous and I was exhausted.
Oh my goodness.
And I was just at the end of myself. But talk about accept everything, deny nothing, invent nothing. I was like, you know what? My character's tired. My character's exhausted. My character is at the end of herself. And that was true. That was fully justified in the text.
Yeah.
But I was like, I just have to use this because I don't have anything else. And it ended up being really fun. And by the end of it, I was feeling good. But yeah, this year will be different.
Oh my God.
Knocking on wood.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank
I know
you.
that we could keep doing
Oh,
this
yeah, I know.
4 hours because we keep going. I'll see you in a couple hours.
I'll see you in a few hours.
Thank you, Dakota. I'm so excited for everything to come.
Yeah.
To see you blossom as an artist. And
You as well.
until next time.
Until next time. And don't forget how to stay alive in the woods.
Shout
Just
out to
don't
you.
forget about it.
Brandon,
Angrier. Peace out, Spring Street.
See you. Thank you for listening to the Spring Street Podcast. If you'd like to support the show, sign up for the Patreon to receive exclusive behind-the-scenes content and check out the sponsor links in the description.